Not very well. I find that there's what we call inspiration porn, where it's like, oh my gosh, look how great they are, isn't it wonderful? And everybody puts little hearts all over it and loves it to death when it's just somebody living their everyday life. You don't see us included in a lot of news stories unless it's about dependency on government or curing somebody with a disability. You see very little about people living their average daily lives with a disability. If you take a look at what either news anchors or politicians, when they're running, they will talk about every different voting bloc that they can think of, but they never mention people with disabilities, even though we're the largest minority at 56 million people. Rarely do you hear that listed as a voting bloc, or when they open up and they say, you know, I support gay rights and you know, Black Lives Matter and they, you know, women's rights, and they go down the list, they never get to disability rights. And so we're just always a forgotten group of people that really doesn't have any presence in the media.
And then I also noticed in different crime stories, when they talk about people with mental illness, they always manage to mention the mental illness, like that's the reason that they committed the crime. And I know from experience, from talking to other people with mental illness, that that's offensive to them, because not everybody with mental illness is violent. But that's the assumption that the media portrays. I was interviewed by a journalist when I volunteered at a nursing home, and I don't even remember how the article was written, but it was basically like, oh, you know, they wanted to know about my disability, and they were saying how great it was that I was volunteering, and you know, but if people want to interview me, I'll you know, answer any questions, but I don't want to be seen as anybody all that special. I want to be seen for who I am, you know. If you want to interview me about wrestling, I'm a big wrestling fan. I'll talk to you about that all day long, or cats or children, you know. Those are the kind of things that I'm interested in. But I'll also talk to you about disability. It's just one aspect of who I am. It's an important aspect, but just one part of my personality.
You know, I'm answering the same questions all the time. It's always about disabled parking. It's always about accessibility downtown. I just did an interview with somebody an hour ago about that. It's always about the same physical barriers or parking or the things that are obvious that you see. The discrimination that we face many times is more intricate than that, and people don't really get past the simple stories. They don't really dig deeper and find out more about what's really going on in the lives of people with disabilities.
For the most part, it's been very positive. I don't think I've never felt like they're interviewing me because I have disability, although I know, like the situation I mentioned earlier, I was in San Antonio, Texas, and I was walking on the boardwalk and using the elevator, and they interviewed me on accessibility of the boardwalk. And so I gave them my perspective of there's not enough signage to where I know where to go when I'm not from that community. It's helpful knowing where to go, so if it's raining, I don't get soaked, so I know where to go.
I guess it comes up more in obituaries, and but as far as covering the cause, and unless there's a big research grant or something, I don't think it is covered very much.
I think the only time I've seen it recently is when it's described like in the current political climate. I've heard Hillary Clinton and, you know, different people talk about the disability community when they talk about LGBT individuals and different groups. So we're kind of seen as that group. So it's talked about in that context. So I really haven't seen very many disability stories unless you go to a specific disability-themed website or magazine. So I would love to see more just stories just in general. Cover all the human experience, not just disability.
They cover the easy things. They cover things like disabled parking or curb cuts or something that they can see. They'll cover new groundbreaking treatments for disability, so they treat us as a condition, not necessarily as people. So I just see a real lack of our involvement in regular, normal news coverage. So they scratch the surface, but they don't really get down to what's going on in lives of people with disabilities. I'll give you a good example. 99% of people don't know that you can't buy private insurance anywhere on the Obamacare exchange or anywhere in the private market if you're quadriplegic and you need attendant care to get out of bed every day. The only way that you can do that is if you're poor and on Medicaid. So you have to be living at 85% of poverty or lower if you're quadriplegic and you just need to get up every day. You can't really go to work unless you're making so much money you can pay somebody $16,000, $20,000 a year to take care of you. So that's a horrible disincentive for people, but most people don't know you can't buy insurance and get attendant care. Get below the surface, get beyond the easy issues, get down to what are the barriers to employment of people with disabilities. Why is it that 25 years after the ADA was signed, our unemployment rate is still the same, hovering around 70%. Most people don't know we have a 70% unemployment rate, and that it really hasn't budged. Start to figure out why it is that we're not able to get jobs. Ask the government agencies who are making millions of dollars supposedly finding us jobs, why aren't they actually getting their job done? No one ever asked vocational rehabilitation, why haven't you made a dent in the unemployment rate? Hold them accountable. No one does that.
Well, I think the one thing that I've seen a lot, crime has been a big issue. It seems like every time you turn around there's a crime story. So I would like to see mental illness continue to be covered in a real way and not seen as something that's dangerous or something that should be stigmatized. And I'd like to see, a full, representation of what it means to have a mental illness, and so people aren't ashamed of it, and just because the media kind of tells us what we should be thinking about different things, especially if we're not educated. So I think they need to be careful about how they put things out there for people that don't know better. I think just people with disabilities are, often the go-to when somebody's doing a disability story. It's like, let's get somebody with a disability to give the perspective. But I think, everybody has knowledge and skills in all different realms. And so if a person has the knowledge and skills, whether they have a disability or not, include them in the story. I mean, it shouldn't matter. If what they say is pertinent to the story, include them regardless.
I think that it obviously needs to be increased, but I think we also have to look at all of the diversity of all the different types of people with disabilities. I probably, in this town, do 50% of the interviews at a minimum of whenever they need a source who happens to have a disability, everybody calls me. That's fine, but there's a lot of other people out there that would be happy to answer your questions. It doesn't always have to be me, just because I have a higher profile in the community.
Yeah, I mean, it's one perspective. I mean, I look at all different, be it newspaper, listen to the TV, and then I make my own conclusion. I probably don't believe everything that article says in the newspaper. If I see that they interview people with some type of situation, be it disability or not, that that impresses me more because it takes time to find people with disabilities and to interview and get to know what the other side of the story is.
No, let me just say this. I don't trust one single source. For me, it's about looking at all different sources, and I like information and I like doing research, so I know that if I watch one, even as much as I love Anderson Cooper, if he tells me a story, I'm not going to say that's the whole side of the story. I'm going to look at other sources and see how they're reporting it and make my own decision. I think you have to be an informed consumer of all media and just, form your own opinion and talk to other people about it and do your own independent research. But I don't think you should believe that the media is the one source for everything that's true. No offense to the journalism students, because you guys do good work, but I think a lot of times people don't take the time to educate themselves on certain subjects, and what the media tells them, oh, that must be the truth. I encourage people to go beyond that and do their own discovery.
Well, no, I'm always skeptical of any media, whether it's left or right, liberal or conservative. I'm not going to take everything at face value. That's why I have a broad cross-section of the media that I consume, so that I can form my own opinion. The first thing you need to do is meet them. You can't build a trust with somebody you haven't talked to. So I think the first thing you have to do is meet people. Try to meet people with differing disabilities so that you get a broader understanding of the entire disability community, and from there they'll let you know whether they trust that you did a good job or not.
This may seem really simplistic, but ask a person with a disability when you're interviewing them, I don't know if it's appropriate for them to see an article before it's published. When you, I know in past time experiences I've had, they've sent me the article and say, did I represent this quote right? Or how does, give them a chance to say, is this an accurate reflection? And then just ask them, what their opinion is. How can I represent you in the best possible way where you feel like I'm getting in all aspects and not being negative towards you in any way or overly positive. The person's the best source. Just ask them. And they'll educate you and you'll educate them, and it'll be good.
Well, I think first of all, it takes a human, which a journalist is a human, getting to know people with disabilities point blank. So it would be you if you were a journalist, getting to know a person with disability, just that we have more in common than we have different. I think that's the bottom line there.
Well, the one thing about people with disabilities is it's not a one-size-fits-all. So I think to just blanketly say, how can you better interact with disabilities, I think it depends on the disability. So like somebody who is blind, they're not, you may want to give them information in alternative formats, if you're sending them something, or, if somebody's hard of hearing, do they need an interpreter? I think you just have to get to know the person and say to them, is there anything that I should know in order to ensure that I get, that our communication is the best way it can be. So it just depends on the person, because you can't lump everybody in together, and just like I said before, educate yourself about the disability in general, just general disability etiquette and language, and don't be so overly nervous about being with a person with a disability that you feel like you're going to screw up, or be relaxed, but just try to go into an interview prepared, and what you don't know, ask the person.
First and foremost, use people first language. So talk to the person. Not if I use a sign, which I don't, but if I use the sign language interpreter, talk to the person, not the sign language interpreter. Because the bottom line, it's all about respect. So do homework and get to know people, and the more you make me feel comfortable, the more I'm going to be willing to share with you information.
Because we work with canine companions, one thing that I am interested in following is the service dogs are considered part of a person's body. They're part of the person. They're a team, a real working dog. And in 2014, the law was extended to give puppies in training the same right as public access to be in public places. However, unfortunately, a lot of people are taking advantage of that. They're putting fake service dog vests on dogs, and so they can get free rides on the airplane, take their pet with them. That kind of news, and yeah, and so that kind of thing I'd be interested in following. And that would also have it's something making more people aware of it, and something that could be solved.
People with disabilities working, be a mayor or a president of an organization that they happen, or a principal of a school, those type of situations, being, more happens out, use a wheelchair, but he's the CEO of a organization. That's why I really want the media to cover, who cares if Mark has MD, muscular dystrophy. Mark is being successful, being a CEO of an organization, if that was the case. Mark just enjoys working out, which I do, working out at the ARC, the local recreation center, being with my friends, getting to know new people. That's things I enjoy doing as well.
Well, I think the two greatest barriers to independence and opportunity for people with disabilities are access to health care and attendant care, so that they can get out of bed and go to work. And then the opportunity to be able to be employed. The failure of all these government programs to assist people to get real jobs is the most underreported story in the disability community that's out there. They have not made a dent in the unemployment rate, and they literally get billions of dollars to counsel us and help us to find jobs, and they're doing a terrible job of it.
I would just love to see more of a representation of people with disabilities on all aspects of the community. I would love to see a person with a disability be president. I know we had FDR, and everybody made a big deal about how FDR didn't want to be photographed in his wheelchair because he didn't want to be seen as disabled. I would love to see a person with more people with disabilities in politics, stories about people with disabilities, as parents, just basically just doing the roles in society that everybody else does. I mean, and it not be a big deal. More people with disabilities on television and commercials. I mean, just a representation of who we are, in print media, because I really very rarely see a person with a disability, like in ads in magazines, and then when I do, it's like a major, like, oh my gosh, stop the presses, no pun intended, but I think once you start integrating just, representation, it won't be and you won't have to ask these questions because it'll just be part of the fabric.